All right. Welcome to the show, Rachel. I'm so happy to have you here and just really excited for personal reasons for this conversation, but also I know everyone tuning in is going to enjoy this. And so I'm going to jump right in. We're going to do a little bit of get to know Rachel for just the intro. And if you want to start by sharing what you do, what lights you up, and just kind of your experience on how you got to where you are.
Oh, well, yeah. First of all, I appreciate you having me with this opportunity, and I will do my best. I come from a sales background, not by choice, and almost all sales communities, right? Like they tell you to have your story, and it's really your sales pitch. And so I got really good at cultivating a story. And they say it should be like 30-second commercials, and I'm like, I can't do that. Okay. So I will try my best because quite literally in my day job, my intro is about 10 minutes long, and I feel like it's just necessary, and it does so much for me in terms of people getting to know who I am. But here's the shortest version I can give you. So I today am somebody who's involved in intimacy coaching, and I've been doing it for a decade. I started, like I said, through sales. It was with an in-home party company a lot of people are familiar with. I'm actually still active with this company. I like to disclose that. I'm not a recruiter. I actually retired from that many years ago, about five. But I do believe in the company's products. And so it's very silly almost to remain an intimacy coach, but then not have a company that you can partner with products potentially for intimacy needs. So I digress. I went to a party 10 years ago. It was a blasty blast. I was actually engaged to be married at the time to my son's father and thought, man, this would be a really fantastic way to potentially pay off a wedding and not even go into debt. But ironically, my fiance at the time was like, there's lots of kinds of businesses in a box. Why'd you pick sex and intimacy? Because you don't even like having sex. And I was like, devastated and pretty embarrassed. But he planted a very important seed because after some reflection, he was so correct. I had a lot of passion and enthusiasm to share those types of products with other women, but I had zero desire to be using them at home. And I was sleeping on the couch. We'd been together for 12 years at that point. I was only 27, however, but to us, my ex and I, we thought this was normal. We grew up with models of marriage that weren't even really that. And so we just kind of assumed you didn't like each other after being together for that long. Luckily, I don't think it was what either of us wanted. So 4 months before the wedding was called off, or was supposed to happen, I called it off. And it was the best decision I ever made. My ex and I today are fantastic friends, and we are even better role models for Cole now that we're separated. And that's a blessing in all in itself. And as of that time, everything changed for me. I went from two incomes to one overnight, but I did obviously have this great opportunity that could supplement my income when I didn't have my kids. So we kept normalcy, we kept a mortgage on the house, all of those things. Kind of cliche, but wonderful. I realized, man, part-time hours, full-time pay, something I like to do. I don't have to work for corporate America anymore. So this summer was actually 8 years of being self-employed. And like I'd mentioned briefly earlier, 5 years ago is when I walked away from the idea of a direct sales MLM structure to what the company I worked with had. I started to recognize and realize, not even really consciously, that the reason I was good at building a team was not because I was recruiting. It was women were coming to me, and it was about my energy, and it was about the passion and purpose I had around empowering and educating and entertaining people around sex and intimacy. And so I started to feel that. And it was like, but what if women don't want to be a part of the business, but they still need what I have, which is happiness, really. And so that's where the shift really took off, and I didn't even know it was happening. It was an awareness of personal development at the exact same time that knocked me off my rocker. I was at a place in my life where I was now engaged to my super supportive and amazing husband, Tony. He'd come to our relationship already with his son, who's only a year older than my son, and then we had a baby girl together. She was 4 months old at the time. I was doing phenomenal as a entrepreneur. I had this amazing soon-to-be marriage. I had a great family that I had never even dreamed was possible. And so, like, obviously that sounds like the perfect thing. The problem was, though, having all those things, I was waking up all the time crying, feeling empty and listless. And my doctor helped me to understand that wasn't postpartum depression. So then I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So here's where I always say I try to speed this story up. Friends, I went back to talk therapy at that time because I knew it would work for me. I committed to the gym for the first time ever and lost like 80 pounds in less than a year. But most importantly, I started understanding like emotional currency and toxic relationships and stuff like that. And so that's how I ended up here, is that now I intimacy coach, which is, I don't even like to say that, but it's just what people can align with. I think coaching is a very watered term. If I had to put a term to it, I would just say that I'm a mentor, but it's still hard for me around my money beliefs to say that, because you have to charge people basically to help them be happy in their lives or learn the tools to do that. But that's what it is. And I'm really happy about that transition and coming, I'm still in the sales world, but it's not where I want to be in service. And that's where I've been transitioning. So as we said right before we got on here, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. This week was the very first week that my littlest started kindergarten. So as of this week, this is the first time I've ever been able to be full-time in my entrepreneurship. I've been a full-time mommy up until now. So there's a lot of things that are kind of unknown, but super exciting. And so it's just like, thank you, universe, for this opportunity to speak with Caitlin today. And hopefully, kind of jumpstart this off to seeing what it really is going to be, honestly.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for your story. That was amazing. And like, yeah, every part of it, I was just like, go Rachel, go Rachel. So I love that. But I'm excited that you were able to share that, because a lot of the kind of ideas of where I thought this conversation was going to go, you've already highlighted some. So that's amazing.
Yay.
And yeah, just congratulations, because you shared so many milestones, and that like self-recognition and getting really clear on what it is that you wanted, and being able to like decide and communicate that, and the supportive partner coming in. And so that was so cool to hear. Thank you. Oh, great start. Okay.
Thank you.
Another intro question that I have is like, what is currently lighting you up? Maybe you're Googling it, maybe you're just like fully immersed in it and like learning, shifting your perspectives around things. Yeah, what are you diving into?
Well, that's a really good question. As somebody who, like, I knew I'd fit this in at some time in the podcast, is recently finally diagnosed with ADHD. Like, that's just a component of who I am. I consider myself a multi-potentialite. I know I'm going to get bored of something and move on. So that's why it's also fascinating to me that I've kept this job this long, because it's the longest job I've ever had. I don't know if any other ADHDers can relate to, you get bored, you self-sabotage in a job. You won't quit because you don't quit, but you'll become so bad at the job they'll ask you to leave politely, basically. Or I would usually leave, is what it was. But my point being is that I think that sex, intimacy, relationships is definitely the core of who I am, because I'm good at it. I can talk about it. It's not taboo. I really feel like people feel empowered after they've had a conversation with me around that. So luckily, there's so many facets. There's oppression and empowerment and women and men and binary. I mean, I could go on forever. So that's what's great about what I do, is that there's always something new on the horizon. I'd say currently, when it comes to sex and intimacy, I get a little goosebumpy talking about it, because it also scares the ever living crap out of me, which it should. The thing that I'm focused heavily on is YouTube, ironically, because it's the newest platform that I've been working through my business on. And it's so heavily men that, I mean, with the company that I partner with, we literally were not allowed to work with men. Like, we could sell to them, but we really couldn't have them at our in-home party experiences and things like that, for various reasons that were actually legit. So this is really new for me, is stepping into the world of men. And I've had women telling me for so long, like, here's what I need my partner to hear what you're saying, basically. And I'm like, yeah, you tell them they suck at foreplay and I'll teach a class. They won't come to a class, okay? Like, if you tell them that they suck at sex when their providership is through money and sex, I digress. It's weird over there. It's the Wild West over there. Like, YouTube will show you what other men are looking at. And I'm like, ew. Like, I should have known, but why are you watching my stuff? Because they are not the same thing. So that is really the core of, it's not even, I shouldn't even say lights me up, because it doesn't. Per se, but I know it's necessary work. And I've been gifted, being a woman, to be able to work with women over the last 10 years. I was very gifted in empowering them. And now it's time for me to step in front of the women who don't have the privilege or education or even the words to say, yo, we need some change happening. So that's like, honestly, like the big focus of what I'm working on in terms of building confidence around, like, yes, I know what I'm talking about. Number one, sir. Number two, don't talk to me like that or think that this is a page like that. Like, that's difficult, because I've never, ever had to deal with that. And I know all women and humans have, but on a professional capacity, I've never.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like YouTube is also a place where like a lot of things are just shared, and so a lot of things are just commented, like thrown to the wall over there. And I don't know how much like filtering and stuff goes on compared to like Instagram, where things get flagged.
Yes.
And I commend you, because yeah, it's stepping into that new audience would be like an initiation into a whole new world.
It is.
So,
You're right. It is.
but
And also coming from a privileged relationship, because my husband is not, nothing like these men who are watching my page. So it's hard for me to be like, oh, like I know that my clients deal with this, but I'm like, I'm married. Like, why would you even say stuff like that? It's
Yeah. But
oh, yeah, but necessary.
yeah, it's needed. And like the more that it's there, the more that they see it, the more they're going to start being like, oh, well, what's this? What's this? The curiosity will be
Yes.
there. So
Yes. And there are just
awesome.
a few men that are like, this is great content. Like, I love what you're saying. And I'm like, great. Tell all your friends, like forward this video. I need you more
Yeah.
than you think that I do. So we'll just tell you that, I guess. But
I
anyways.
feel like your content, like, as I've been following you for years, and I feel like your content just lands. Like when people like share your videos, it's like the right people will see it,
Mhm.
And so like your messages are very like expansive through like the network, through sharing. And it's like not knowing, okay, who exactly gets it, but
Right.
knowing that it is getting into the right hands is another way of needing to trust the universe, right? But
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up actually. Because I just have to say this out loud for the universe too, is because like anybody who is thinking about like being an entrepreneur or business owner is that if you go to my pages now, you're going to see I get on average, we're going to say 200 to 400 views a video, but that could be disheartening to somebody else, especially when I've been in business for a decade. But just like you mentioned, I have been able to, you're going to have to like dissect from some money beliefs problems is what it is, or validation that if your numbers aren't hundreds of thousands or you're not going viral all the time, is that your purpose? My purpose isn't to go viral, even though I'm working from a lot of people pleasing and validation from my childhood. Okay. My message is to get education out. And just like you said, it's not going to fall on the people who aren't interested in growing. It's absolutely going to hit the ears of people who are like, I need my partner to hear this message, or I need to know how to vocalize this message to my partner. And that's the small collective where you're hitting the right crowd. You don't want to be wasting your time with people who don't want your message anyway. So I appreciate you saying that, because it's also validation for me, is I always have to remind myself that when I look at my mentors that I'm not where they are, even if I've been in businesses at the same time. It's like, but I also don't, we have different goals and lifestyles and intentions behind our businesses. And that's important to remember for everybody as you're getting started and as you continue, I think.
mm,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to switch gears on another question, but I'm just going to dive right in because I want to keep talking about intimacy and just kind of break this down in Rachel's world.
Sure.
Um, so some of the things, I guess I'm curious about, like when you came across your sales business, like were you comfortable with this? Is this something that you were like diving right into?
Yeah, that's a great question. People don't really ask me that one a lot, to be honest. I like to kind of work this into conversation just because I think it's silly and fun sometimes. Is that like rarely, but people will say like, what do your parents think, or anybody really, my dad, I was like maybe 3 months into doing these in-home parties, and he said, I think you found your calling. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird, Dad. Why would you say that? But I think what he meant, of course, was that he was seeing the energy and the passion behind. I mean, I was a chronic caller inner in a corporate job. If I could find a loophole like FMLA or sick days or whatever, I was not in the office. So I took that and ran with it, especially, healing that childhood self. Okay. And by the way, because I never used my college degree that my dad pretty much 3/4 paid for, and he never made me feel bad about that. So that only, again, compounded. I'm on my right path, basically. And so when it came to sex and intimacy, it's always been a curious subject for me. And I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I feel like I may have been more curious, and I'm not going to use the word obsessed, but I just had a lot of questions. And coming from a household where they were never answered, I had to seek those out myself. And there were I definitely, I was so grateful for the self checkout at the library when I was like 14 or 15, because I was checking out books about Karma Sutra, and not to have sex, but to understand these things I did not know about our bodies. So I think it has always been a higher peak interest for me. And for some reason, when I jumped into it, I was complimented so humbly in the very beginning. People would say, like, how long have you been doing this? And I'm like, I started 3 months ago. And they're like, are you kidding? And again, I don't think that's about skill. Like, there's skill and will in business. I think that I just had like that's why some girls are great at selling makeup and some are great at selling Tupperware, because they could be passionate about domestication or about makeup. And I was passionate about sex. When my fiance said you could have picked so many other kinds of businesses, you're right. And even over the years where people have tried to recruit me into other MLMs, I've considered it because there's better pay structures in the company that I was with. But I wasn't passionate about those things. And I tried to consider it. But that to me was like wrong intention. That's money driven. That's not belief driven around feeling good about what I'm doing. And there's nothing wrong with people who are successful at that. That's just, I knew that it felt like I was going to go right back into that corporate mindset of doing somebody else's work and dreams fulfilling, if that makes sense. So I definitely think there was a lot of alignment in what I have, and it was a really great opportunity because I loved college and school, but I can't say to, especially now with this recent diagnosis of understanding why I will never do another fucking paper in my life. I'm not really interested in going back to school and getting a degree. I'd love that because I feel like other people's expectations of my experience would be validated. But I have plenty of people coming through the door that trust me. And so I feel like what I'm doing is okay, at least at this time. I can always change my mind around that. But the experience has been light years of what I probably would have learned in a classroom.
Yeah. I love this. I have to say, I know we're gonna do a human design reading
Yes.
in the very future, very
Yeah.
near future. I don't know if you've looked at human design at all, like around a chart or anything, but I am so excited for that because you said a few things that I'm just like, I'm trying to like see your chart
Yeah.
now, and I
Am I
can
a generator? Is that a term in this thing? Human
yes,
design? Yeah,
yes,
that's what I thought.
generator.
Yeah.
I would guess you are a generator or manifesting generator. One, because you talk about like it's the energy, like you would call out of work, you would find every excuse to not be in work, and then
Yes.
you find something that like you don't maybe logically think like, oh, I love this, like let me go do this, but you were like, oh, like let me try this, and you were really good at it, and it was
Mm-hmm.
reflected back to you how good you were.
Yes.
And it was like a relief. And that's where manifesting generators and generators, if they actually put their energy into things that like light them up and that they want to do, it's like ease, right? Like it's like
Yes.
this bliss of like they're able to just go do it. And it's almost like other people are able to watch them and it's like, how are they doing that? Like
Yeah.
almost effortlessly. It appears that way.
Yes.
And I'll say like that is your energy. Like when you show up and you talk about things that you're like, you can just tell like she was really drawn to just come talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you get people's attention. So I love that. And I love that you just had that. It's almost like when you were saying, like as a teenager, you just like you were curious about something and you trusted it. Like
Mm-hmm.
even though it wasn't talked about, even though nobody could
Very
answer your
taboo. Very
question.
taboo. Yeah. Still in the early
And
2000s. Yes.
yeah, and I think that's so cool because as a kid, I feel like I was curious, but I didn't know like to go look things up. Like I just
Yeah.
didn't have that motivation. And I think probably a lot of that was conditioning of like, oh, that would mean a lot of things about me,
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of leads me into my next question is like, how do we learn about intimacy? Like, of course, a lot in our childhood of like
Mm-hmm.
what we're exposed to, what we're not exposed to, but not just like sexual intimacy. Like, there's the emotional intimacy, there's having an intimate moment, like there's all these definitions. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question because how and when do you think we learn about intimacy? And then when are we at this spot where, okay, let's really decide what intimacy is for us and define that and maybe step into new perspectives around it?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that honestly, that could be a podcast in itself. And so two things. One, you might have to remind me to come back to some things because I will squirrel. I'm good at that. And two, I'm gonna take a deep breath because being so passionate about stuff like this, as you can imagine, I talk fast about anything. It's not even about nervousness anymore. It's just because I want to get it all out. And I'm an over processor. Like I can just do that really quickly. So all right. So there, to me, there's two answers that we want to consider when we talk about like where do we learn intimacy or where do we want to consider our resources come from. There is the sound logical reality, and then there's the woo woo side that I think we need to cover. And I got goosebumps. That's my universal sign that I'm usually speaking my truth. So I always appreciate that, universe. But when what was really beautiful about my personal development journey was that I was already a figure on social media before that was again really the norm and popular back in the day. There wasn't as many people doing it, is what I'm saying. And so my client base who've been with me this entire decade or even the last 6 to 7 years, they witnessed everything that I went through. And there was a lot of it that you didn't see behind the scenes, of course, but there was a lot that you could watch happen, or in the privacy of my client page, I was disclosing a lot. So my point being is that when I went through a lot of massive change, as you can imagine, there was a lot of people coming up to me afterwards, like, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your life? And I was so honest that I'm like, I don't know. Like, I know that I broke my life, and I basically had to put the pieces back together with a lot of different resources. And so I created an empowerment class, which was also a branch off of this request from women saying, like, we need our partners to hear these things. And I'm like, great, but we can't start with sex and intimacy. Most people don't want to come to a class about that anyway. So let's back it up, and let's talk about how we got to any belief system that we're a part of, because they're all connected anyway. Like, we don't think about that, but especially for women, we wear way too many hats, right? So the reality based of this that I talk about in my empowerment class is that understanding where any of your belief systems come from. So the word activity that I do is that again, everything's connected, but I try to break things down in 5 categories for the human form. You have relationships, obviously, intimate or not. You have wealth, which is more than money. And then you have mental and physical well-being, because I don't think you can separate those. The next one is spirituality, which I don't really think you can separate from mental and physical, but most people aren't there yet. And then the last one is usually passion, purpose, and all those kinds of other things, right? So when we start talking about like money, it's like, what do you think about the way what are the beliefs around money in our society around men and women? Like, women are bitches, and women have to climb to the top by getting under the table. And, men are given more positions and opportunity, like all of those things. And so then you start to understand why I think the way I think about myself as a woman, or however I identify. And what do I expect out of my partners? Do they know what that expectation is? And so when we look at that helps us to understand where we currently are, especially if we have discourse in our relationships, because one of my favorite phrases of all time is that unverbalized expectations lead to resentments. So we're out here thinking that our partner is going to fulfill our needs, especially if we have trauma from our childhood, especially if we're in good relationships. That is something people don't think about, is that when you're in a good relationship, you're probably self-sabotaging. 1, because the ego has to create a problem for you to solve anyway. But 2, because now you've switched from parental needs to my parent or my partner's putting into those needs. So that's an important correlation, I think. The woo-woo side of intimacy is that everything is a relationship. And the first thing is that most of us are dealing with issues with our mom. It's completely primal, but she expelled us from birth. And that was the safest place we could have ever been. And if we did not grow up in households, religions, communities, even in that 2 parental household figure with safeness at all, or inconsistent safeness, then that's the only thing we have to revert back to, is when we were so safe in the womb, nothing could hurt us. So we're mad at mom, especially women, because that's woman on woman crime. How dare you? You knew what I would come out into this world, and you still did it to me. And women, like, mom and daughter relationships, whatever. But usually with men, of course, it's either that my mom loved me way too much, or she didn't love me enough. Like, there's really no in between with men. It's like, ugh. And that's why a lot of women end up becoming the mom in the relationship as well. So we have to recognize that intimacy starts from conception, and even really prior to that, because what was the energetic relationship between the 2 people who birthed you? Right, those things matter. I baked 2 completely different babies, one at 21 with no awareness of who I was in an inconsistent relationship, and my second child was with a loving, committed relationship where we both knew where we were going. We were completely supported. I would have got pregnant 8 more times by that guy just because of the way that my pregnancy was. It was a complete night and day contrast, and those things matter. And I know you already know that, because that's what generational trauma is. And it's the one thing I can't get about that, here's one of my squirrel moments, right, is that we don't understand or think that things are passed down through DNA with trauma. Why? Why not? Like, you will argue, oh, easy, that eye color would be transferred, but you would also say, oh, he gets that temper from his father. That's not a physical thing that the body grows. So how is it any different than you're still suffering from your mother's trauma? Those eggs were in your grandmother's body. That energetic space transferred through the DNA, but you have the ability to heal it, friend. So yes, though, that's the woo-woo side of it. We're always being exposed to what a relationship looks like. And that's honestly, like, what are humans doing here? We're here for that connection and that love. So when we don't talk about the things that influence our intimacy, we're not even acknowledging the things that subconsciously will. For most of us, we did not grow up in households, in religions, and relationships that promoted open conversations. Literally, it was all about shame and guilt around touching your own body or understanding those. It's how we got here. And so we have that problem there. But if you don't talk to your kids about it, they're learning about it already through a lack. What did I say? I went to a library in the early 2000s, right? But now you got YouTube, now you got TikTok, you have anything and everything your children could be exposing themselves to. But don't forget about movies, books, and television. Those are the bare minimum that people brush over just because it says, a show for everyone. Really? I've seen some things that my little one should not have on an everyone marked YouTube video or something like that. So that's it. Most of us go through making the assumption that if I didn't talk to them about it, then they won't be exposed to it. But it's really the opposite. And now they've driven their own ideas around sex and intimacy. And most often why young ones are having sex way before they're supposed to, because they didn't have the foundational love at home, and even through an idea that I could receive this from self, so I'm going to seek it out someplace else. So that was a lot of word vomit again, but it's really so complex. Really so complex and also easy at this exact same time. Just recognizing that everything you do around people, not just your children, influences those people. It's very cliche to say, do as I say, but not as I do, or whatever that fucking phrase is. But it doesn't matter. You can't tell people what to do. You have to show them what to do.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. That could be a whole episode because there's so much from that. So I feel like that could be like a ton of reflection points or journal prompts, because like I liked your breakdown, and just remembering that, like, your intimacy is, or how you are intimate, whatever, like it really is reflective in all parts of your life.
Yes.
And I know this. It's like I know this, and being able to like go execute changes because of that is a different thing. And like having that awareness and then like taking action on that is very different. And I feel like it could be overwhelming to be like, oh yeah, like I avoid money and that's affecting my relationship. And I've very much connected those two. And now like broadening that to like, oh, well, what's like my relationship with my parents? And I loved what you said about the conception. I wrote that down. Intimacy starts at conception, and so much starts at conception. But like thinking about, that relationship between you and your mother and what that was while like in what during the pregnancy, and then like coming to earth, which is very traumatizing. So a lot to digest there. There was another thing that you said, the unverbalized expectations lead to resentments. And this is huge. And I think another almost block, like I love that quote, but then also it's like that communication, that expression. And okay, I might recognize that like I'm not feeling what I want to feel, and I'm not showing up how I want to show up. And something wants to change. And so like that's where this break, like, okay, my intimacy, I want to up level. How do we communicate that? How do we start to express that? Probably with ourselves first. But then like to have that confidence to say, hey, like I don't like how this is going. Let's do something about it.
Yes, this is a good one. And to preface all the other stuff first, honestly, consistently what I've seen within clients and my motherfucking self is that the reason we won't have the hard conversations is because, especially for women, we've been conditioned that somebody's going to complete our happiness, usually a man, white and shining armor syndrome, right? And so we won't have the hard conversations because we're basically accepting crumbs of a pie when we don't know the pie exists. And we will eat the crumbs. We'd rather have those than starve alone. And so the work for self is that you have to remember that intrinsically you have value just for being here, just from being born, you're enough. And you forget that you can fulfill every one of your needs by yourself because you've been conditioned by all those things we said earlier, that's something else outside of you. And it's always just a partner, right? That's exactly why we have a problem in the trap with things. Things will make me happy. So when we do the work that we're meant to do as humans and understand that I am enough, and once we have the realization, you mentioned part of this earlier, that's not enough. Just because I know the realization of my truth doesn't mean that I have fixed the belief system yet. So my auto programming subconscious is still running on that track tape that says, who the fuck do you think you are? You're not good enough. You could never do this. See, I told you so. So that's the discomfort you'll live within once the recognition hits. So it's really important that you do understand self, that you accept that you're enough, because if you have a fear that you can't bring up the hard things, it's because you're afraid that person could potentially walk away. If they do, you have to be okay with that. It's not a reflection of who you are. It's a reflection of that person usually the reality base is that your change has made them so insecure with themselves subconsciously because they didn't know they could change, and they haven't done the work to change, and they can't be in your presence because it physically makes them unhappy. And plus you've killed off somebody that they love, and you're not meeting the expectations of the people pleasing person that you used to be for them. So who are you anyways? But when we've separated from that, yeah, right, then we can be okay with if they decide to leave, because okay, we don't want that person anyway. But if it's more of an idea around, I scrolled myself out of what I was talking about here. So we're talking about partners and discord, right? I don't remember where I was going with that. It'll come back. I can't think about it because the harder I think, it'll chase itself farther away, right? But being okay with self, basically. Like if I lose that person, then that's what it was. The most mature aspect that we could come to in relationships would be, I have a need, and partner says, "Oh, you deserve to have that need met, but I don't think I can do it." No problem. I respect you, partner. Thank you for adding what value you've had to my life up until this day. I wish you the best. I wish you'll find everything that you need. And because not only have I vocalized that need, I was right when I said it out loud and made it even more stronger. I've now added myself to a vibrational frequency to attract a partner who can meet that need. But we take everything personally. And so that's where, if we now have had that awareness around self, if we did the right thing for our children by expressing that, what healthy relationships do is by sitting down many stages of seasons of life. And if you don't really recognize those, like, marriage and birth of children and whatever, then just do it quarterly. And you sit down and say, here's how I like to be loved, and here's how I can show up as a partner. How about you? And then partner reflects those. And then we ground ourselves in the things that we already have in common, we know are important to us. If there's a gray area, we definitely need to talk about those. And then we throw out the stuff that was like, I thought you were going to expect me to be your maid. And he's like, no, I wanted to do the cooking. You're like, oh, thank Jesus. So then that's not important, right? But it was an expectation we both had that women do the cooking. So when we give ourselves permission to let those needs change, because they will, that's what happens, is that even when we don't know what our needs are, we, again, make the assumptions that our partners are going to know. But when we get good at that, we'll get better at recognizing when the needs change. Maybe you're not a gift giver anymore. Maybe you're a words of affirmation person. That's okay. But you got to be okay with understanding that need changed, and then vocalize it, because partner's not a mind reader. That's one I'm telling myself, by the way. Gotta tell myself that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Give them some grace. They're doing the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. And just like, I agree 100% on everything you said. And just having that acceptance of like, somebody might not be able to meet your needs, and that's okay. And it's like, the sooner you know that, the better, probably, right? Like,
yeah.
My perspective is the better. Like, I want to know right now, like, if you're not going to be able to meet my needs, and the expression of that. And it's like, there's been a lot of just like truth, like a lot of energy around truth for me lately. And it's like, it is a disservice for me to not tell you how I feel or like what I need. And maybe it's okay with you, but like, I have to have that conversation, and that like almost like pull of like, this needs to be resolved. And that, I think, is like already tapping into like that energetic like resonance changing. Like, we're no longer on the same wavelength. And like, not that we can't be, but like, I need to figure it out. I need to know if we can get there. And
Yes.
I think for me, I mean, my history was, I'll just see if they get there, I'll wait and see. And it's like, no, don't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Don't
Yes.
recommend.
Yes. Or the very cliche version of, I can help them change, right? I'm the
Yeah,
fixer. I'm the fixer. I'll make it
yeah,
happen. That is very difficult with change, I believe, is that, especially as you become the person, when positive change sticks, it's infectious for a number of different reasons. But when it feels good to self, then we want everybody to do it, And I know that in the beginning stages of my personal development, one of the things I got wrong was making the assumption that my truths were everybody's truths. And so, like, for that person to not want to go to the gym all of a sudden, or for that person to not want to set a goal list, or that person not even want to manifest under a full moon with me, it's like, what's wrong with you? Like, not that I'm telling you that you're a bad person, but I do feel like you could be a better person if you were happier like me, And so that's a trap that we really do have to recognize. Like you had said, is just understanding people for their individualness is so important, because that's a gift they have to bring to the world. And also helps, by the way, because for some people who get a little self-conscious, it's like that whole idea that if I give, or if I have more, it's because other people have to go without. That's the good side to it. And there's the other side to it, whereas I can't give because then I go without, that's that whole spectrum. So really recognizing that the more you give, the more you get. It's really a very true universal magnetic little like attracts like. It's not fake, it's real.
Yeah. Abundance mindset for sure.
For real, yeah, yes. And you said this earlier, by the way, and I just wanted to circle back to that. You said ebb. You're talking about ebb, and that's exactly what it is. Is that when you operate from your true frequency, friends, you'll feel in flow with the universe, which is a real thing. You're riding in the frequency that you were meant to ride, and so it's not that you don't have hard days and bad things. It's that you start to learn the tools to navigate those things and get through them quicker, so that you feel confident to do so and that you can get back to the better feeling, which you are choosing. So don't forget that. Don't forget that. That's all in your power. Okay. It's so exciting.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Oh, I want to get into a little bit about confidence, like intimacy and confidence, and how you might see these like correlate maybe with yourself or your clients, of how much of like our lack of intimacy, like if we're feeling the lack, has to do with confidence. And like, are there things that we can help with that like naturally will maybe boost our confidence that will let us tap into this kind of other spectrum of being more intimate with people?
Yeah, that's a good one. I, from my experience, I feel like the greater gap in intimacy and connection, which is obviously more true in heterosexual couples, it's about energy, because typically women wear more hats, and the emotional labor that happens in a household almost always kind of goes unspoken. And it's odd considering that we all know what it takes to run a household, but that if you add kids to the mix with scheduling and I always talk about the dreaded like switching their clothes out. Nobody thinks about that. That's hard effing work, but there's a huge discrepancy, and so it's typically more about energy, in my opinion, than it is about confidence. But when it is about confidence, it's hindering. It's very hindering, because a lot of the time women don't know it. They, again, because we've been conditioned to believe that we are objects, and a lot of women were conditioned to believe that they were obligatory some things to a partner. And men believe that too. They believe that we enjoy being their servants and that we get a lot of praise out of being the homemakers, which we do, but it's unspoken and unpaid. So we need more than that, especially within our partnership. So it goes back again to figuring out those belief systems and what you think an expectation of a person is. When it comes to women, I find that if you're going to build your confidence, it absolutely is a relationship with self first. But ironically, a lot of us aren't going to get there, because if we didn't have, again, that environment growing up in some way, shape, or form, it's very hard to cultivate by yourself at an older age. You're dug into those belief systems. So at least in my experience over the last 10 years, I would say you got to have a good support system. You got to have a community of women that, I mean, and we're usually good about that. That's something that men very much lack. They don't have the freedom that we have to be able to discuss some of the things that we do in private. And I wish that for them, because I think it'd be a game changer. But having a group that you can quite literally be the rawest, the realist with, is with no judgments. That's so helpful, because you can get out some of the negative stuff that doesn't really need to be processed or, put on place in your partnership or whatever. That's a first step, because again, it's just confidence with itself. It has nothing to do with your body and sex. It's I'm a decision maker. I believe in my intuition. I know that this is right for me. That's something that you need to believe and feel supported with. The next complex part of this is that I find that, there's two ways you can go about this. The better way, in my opinion, of course, is to build confidence with self independently. And hopefully, again, through your programming growing up. But it's so much of a minority for women that you might have to do it within a relationship. I think that can be difficult, because if you don't have a partner who is, I'm going to use this term loosely, more liberal, more open, more progressive as a guy, to understand the complexities of a woman and then support those, because when they understand that a great woman in flow will only better their partnership on whatever capacity, that's very difficult. Women will be hindered for the same reasons we discussed earlier, that people don't like change. How can a partner, especially if they have very cliche ideals about what a woman is supposed to be doing at home, starts to get bigger, badder, faster, stronger as a business owner or as a friend or as a member of the community? A lot of men can't handle that. A lot of partners, a lot of people can't handle the outshiningness, especially if it's a woman, right? Now, I am very fortunate, and I love to tell this story because I need people to know that it's possible. As you can imagine, over the decade, people have said, like, does your husband have a brother? And I'm like, he does, but he's married. Okay. But I don't have a lot of exposure to men to be able to help heterosexual women out with in this regard. And to be honest, again, the system's worked for them for so long. Why would they have any initiative to change or refocus again, except for that wonderful thing that I said is that when you have a big badass partner and you support her, you both grow together, right? So for women, if you are lucky enough to have a partner, and if you don't, this is what I usually say is like through a coaching session or having an in-home party experience, since I'm still active in those and it's free to do, get your girlfriends together and we talk about all this stuff. I say, blame it on Rachel. I went to one of those sex toy party things and you wouldn't believe what an intimacy coach said. She said that the vulva owner body needs 18 to 24 minutes of pleasurable foreplay before sex should even begin. And then the partner might be more receptive to it or might have some orgasms or quite a few orgasms. Did you hear what I just said? I give you the A plus B equals C roadmap to her pleasure and success. So you got to give her that space. And I'm telling you that if you cultivate, girl, you're badass, girl, you're amazing, girl, I can't get enough of your sexy body. Like she will be an outstanding human being that you almost don't even recognize. So it's difficult and it will be specific to each individual. And that's what I love about coaching, right? Is that I can give free content every single day and night. And I do it on the platforms as much as I can. But as you'd mentioned, you throw a big ball at something and it's going to stick to maybe 3 to 4 to 5 people in that group. But if we're speaking individually, then I'm going to be able to tell you more specifically, especially based on your programming, what we're going to need to break through so that you can really invest energy into your fun, sexy self. Because I'm telling you, there's nothing like being able to break through the pleasure barrier that most women don't even know that they're allowing themselves to hinder their experience with self and a partner because of that, all that programming. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I love that. Yeah. So definitely I could see how like the one-on-one really going through and just seeing like, what is the things that I believe. I do this all the time. Just, I have not dove into like, it's so funny, like about relationships and intimacy. And I'm like going through the things in my head right now. So, okay. I have one more kind of bigger question, and I'm curious because you've kind of told the perspective of here's the more 3D logical side of things, and here's the woo side of things. And this is like my whole purpose is like bringing the spiritual into the 3D. And yes. So I really want to get your perspective and just kind of hear what you would advise if maybe you've had relationships in the past where maybe they were good, maybe they were clearly not what you wanted, but you're like, now I know what I want and I just keep attracting whatever, not it. So how do we manifest a partner of our dreams, knowing that we're like aligning to that energy that we really want to call in, that supportive partner?
Good question. I still think another podcast that you could just talk all day about it because it's possible. And I know you know this, but it's ironic because this was actually one of the things I was very insecure about as I started coaching was like adding the spiritual in only because I knew it was my truth again, but I also knew how difficult it was to kind of convince people of things they could not see. And it's just like, anyways, so much easier when you really understand how the universe works and how you cultivate your reality, which is so true, right? So one of the lessons that I like to talk about that was a good one for me is that, like, because when I first came into manifesting, I really was brainwashed into thinking all you had to do was think good thoughts and then it was going to happen, which I do think is kind of the blanket lesson people get when they think about manifestation, but it is action, right? Universe loves action. And once you've thought a thought, it now means it's possible, which should be a relief. If you're like, I want to be a millionaire, it means, okay, I can be a millionaire, but it doesn't mean you have to know how to do it yet. It means that once you've decided, you're going to have to stick to the good versus bad or neutral, right? Like, those things don't exist. We give them that credit. But when we switch into that understanding, universe, God, whatever it is that you may or may not believe is your higher power, right? It speaks language. It's just a frequency like everything else, right? But the problem for us is that we think that words matter more and they're made up, and if, excuse me, if the universe spoke language, then we'd speak one universal language, which we don't. So we have to remember that universal language is emotional, right? And so we have to get very intentional about the words that we use. It's funny, you say things like, that person was such a pain in my neck, or I'm so angry I see red, right? And those things happen. You get a neck ache and a backache, and all of those things correlate to energy. And it's weird because a lot of people who struggle with money always have lower back pain. Why is that? Why are we all hindering? because the body's amazing. Okay. So when we understand emotional language, right, it's very blasé, but I don't want to be fat versus I want to be healthy seem like we're asking for the same thing. But universe hears doubt and fear and all of these negative things about how you feel about being fat. They're going to deliver more of that energy to you because that's how you're requesting it. They don't hear not fat, not fat. It hears all of those emotions I just said. So like attracts like. When we get into the mindset of I'm so worthy of a healthy life, that's not specific to a body type. That's not specific to a number on a scale. It's just happiness around existence. Okay, universe is going to give you opportunities, whether that's, you know, plugging up a podcast with Caitlin because you both have the same type of universal energy, right? That's how that works, is that I've been in such gratitude around my job and my passion that that's where the flow comes in. I didn't have to try for that. You messaged me. I love that. I'm so grateful. I create my own opportunities, of course, but that's how it works. That's how two people align with each other and they connect with energy. It's not just because we have similar views on the universe, you know? So that's one thing, is that we have to get very clear, right? Like, I don't want to be alone. That's usually the problem. I don't want to be lonely. Okay. I want a partner who's fulfilling and respectful and loving. So there's a lot of cliche to like writing the list, ideal partner, but it's true. Again, pen to paper, you give that more frequency, you give it more power. And when I do the empowerment class, actually, we end the session. Actually, we start the session with it. Sorry, but it's the ideal day exercise. So it's pretty much the same thing. Because if you think about it, how many people, if you say like, what is it that you want? They don't know, because we've been so conditioned and primed as humans to bitch about all the lack in our lives that was like, oh, well, I know I don't want to be fat, but I guess I didn't really discuss with self what kind of body that looked like and whatever. So when we get very clear about that, it's not, again, that just because I put it in paper that all of a sudden my life will manifest into this day. It's that I have now made a decision with the universe that every step I make puts me closer to that ideal day or further behind, because there's no more neutrality. I've made the decision about where I want to be. So that's all self-sabotage back there, boo-boo. That's okay. But you just got to move forward with this vision, not the overwhelmingness of, but it was a house in Colorado and it's $1 million. No, you don't worry about that. You worry about the frequency and energy of how you'll feel when you get there. And universe is like, cool, here's all those opportunities so that we can make that happen, but not overnight. That's why there's a delay in manifestation. Otherwise there'd be a problem.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that, because, you know, I think about with partners, I haven't been looking for a partner for a long time, but the conversations with the girlfriends, it's like, you know what you don't want in a partner.
Yep.
And so like shifting that to what do you want and what are those words? And I love the tip of like, just write it down. And it's not to be like, I'm writing down my manifestations, which I do
Mm-hmm.
all the time, but it is to put those words in your aura. And so you're not always thinking like, I want to lose weight, or I want a partner who doesn't cheat on me. Like, I want that for you too, but like, let's use the word faithful or like
Yes.
a different word, you know,
Yes.
and like the frequency of that, because we know the frequency of words is a thing, like it's energy.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even though they're just words, it's like, what is our perspective? Like, what's our frequency that we've attached to that word?
Right.
Knowing like that literally changes things with
Yep.
water. We know this with water, how the frequency of words can change the water molecules. And
Mm-hmm.
so attracting in a partner, it's like, get clear on what you do want and start using that language. And I think about like even dating apps. I know there's a lot of opinions about dating apps, and I'm not on one, obviously, but I think that like they're not a bad thing, because if you go in with the intention and the energy and you know what you're looking for. I've had a friend who like, she's gone on and she's found her partner, like it's happened twice now, you know, and she's like, this is the one I'm gonna date for like, who knows how long. She had her current boyfriend. She went on and it was the first guy she found. And I was like, see, like they're not all bad. And so
No.
I
No.
love that, because it's like it all comes back to like everything we talked about today. It's coming back to that like clarity with yourself. And nobody can really tell you that except getting curious with yourself and doing that quote unquote work.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I like to just approach people with that is like, yeah, that's work. And it's like, well, we're doing a lot of work doing other things too. And if you're not happy with what you're doing or happy with how your day went,
Mm-hmm.
then why not just try this work for a little bit and see what changes. And that is the fear. We talked about that too quite a bit today, is like that fear of change. And that's one thing I really support people with, of like that transformation process, because I'm a big change person. Like I go crazy if there's not change. And so it's like I can really like be a solid foundation for people when they are changing or like going through changes. But it's like remembering, like, there's a reason you're being called to change and like do something, and having that trust, having that connection with yourself or the universe or your spirit guides or God, and like working with them, like,
Mhm.
like having that support and just knowing like I am being called to look at this, and I maybe I don't know how it's going to change, but there probably is some change involved, and I trust that it's for my highest good. And really just like holding that, and like what vocabulary are we using then, because a lot of people would do like the chaotic change, and I did that for many years. I just waited until things blew up, and I liked that. Like a part of me liked that, like the pressure of like I have to figure this out right now.
Yes.
But there's also this beautiful co-creation that we can do that I've learned over the last 10 years of like, I don't have to wait for chaos. I can spot it from a mile away.
Yes.
And then it's fun. Like that's what makes it fun, because then you get to use the language you want to use to call in the things that you actually want to call in. And that's the energy that people are attracted to.
Yes.
And like
Well,
that reminds me so much of your story at the beginning of the episode. So
well, that's fantastic, and I am grateful that you shared that part with us as well. And what I want to say, by the way, is because if you, I don't know, I'm sure you probably can relate to running into clients who actually don't like change because you said you like it. That's not me. Nope.
I
After all this time, I still resist change like it's a son of a bitch. So if that is like something that you run into with your client base, like one of the things that I know is part of my programming that I'm working to reroute and reprogram and all that kind of stuff, right? Is that just like you had said, number one, I will tell myself you have survived 100% of the things you didn't think you could so far. And one of the struggle buses I've had is like having the knowledge that the universe is not only my co-creator, but has my back. But why can't I trust that ahead of time? Like I am in that pattern still, not nearly as bad as it used to be. And I will warn anybody who's listening that if you, just like Caitlin mentioned, like if you don't get into understanding what your patterns are, you and not seeing them a mile away, they'll be so catastrophic in your life at some point that they'll affect other people. And that gives me goosebumps because that was my too far. That was like, I'll never let it get to a point where the problem has to be fixed after the problem. I'm going to be more aware. And it doesn't change that I have anxiety about the change. But you have to remember again, that's your primal brain, friends, is because it's literally projecting any potential future that could happen to try to formulate a solution so that you will survive. How exhausting when there are unlimited future possibilities, right? So that's the purpose of all of this anyway, right? Is to always remember to come back to this moment, this present moment, because it's the only one that exists anyway. But when we take those deep breaths and remind that primal body, there's no tiger in the bushes. I'm not about to die. I understand that if I ask this person out, I could be rejected, but it's not real fear. Take a couple of deep breaths, reset that nervous system, and then you choose who to be in this present moment. And that applies to anything and everything that you're doing, but it takes practice. This body has been around a lot longer than a conscious mind has. And so we have to remember how much we are literally babies. Like I think that as collective society, we're only about 12 or 13. I do not think that. I mean, there are some of us that are quite literally much wiser and more experienced, of course, but collectively as a human race, especially with men at the helm, we're only 12 or 13. We have a long way to go, which is also really exciting thinking about like the potential of being like 30s and 40-year-old thinking, that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So I really, yeah, everything you said. I get really triggered when people want to work with me, but then like I can clearly tell that they don't want to change.
Yep.
Like, you know what I do, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And they know. And there's a difference with those people who like I can just tell like, we're not moving. And so
Mhm.
I'm going to save you some time. Versus people who are terrified of change but know that they want to change.
Yes.
Or like know that there's a potential for change. Like they don't even have to know what they want to change. And that's actually what a lot of people come to me is like something needs to change, but I don't know what can.
Yep.
And I get like, we can break things down. We can zoom all the way out. And we're just these little game pieces, and we're in control of everything that we do. So we get to decide. And it's like, it's very simple, but it's a shock to somebody who has gone through the motions for years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also very empowering. And it's like to be able to like hold yourself through that or be held through that is like a whole thing. But I really do like just approach things in a different way. And like I live in the present moment, but also knowing how limitless we are. Like
Yeah. Isn't that such a conundrum? That's like
it is.
literally what you have to
Like,
come to accept as being a human is that unlimited possibility, but the limitations of being in a physical body.
yeah. And like they're both true,
Yep.
right? Like
Yeah.
and that and like really living from a place of like as simple as I hate doing this. Like my human self does not like doing this task, but I also know that by doing this, it's going to make like laundry. It's going
Mhm.
to make my environment better. And I want my environment to feel good. Like this and that can both be true. And
Mhm.
it's like that is with everything,
Yes.
anything and everything.
Yes.
You can know that a change is needed in your reality, but maybe that change is happening like in a past lifetime,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I'm all about, all the possibilities, but
Yeah.
anyway, I got on a tangent there.
That's okay. It was a good one. I mean, because again, like, like, so when I didn't find spirituality till after personal development. I had no religion experience really growing up, except, of course, outside sources. But I actually fell into a kind of a trap of spirituality because I didn't have enough tools for self yet, where to me it became a form of escapism, right? Because like if it's my past self, then it's not me, blah blah blah. And if I have a God and a universe that's outside of me, then there's some responsibility I don't have to accept as a human, basically. And so I'm much better at having my belief system, but remembering I'm here to play the game, because just having all that spiritual exposure really doesn't do anything for you here. Like that's when you go back from wherever you came from later. Like you came here to play the video game, so play the video game and be intentional about it. So that can be really overwhelming, I think, sometimes for people, but it's an important notion. And it's funny to me, like one of the things I feel like I still get hung up on is like why humans and why consciousness and when did it happen and why? Like, why did we go from being a primal thing to this thing? Like, why? And I saw a TikTok once where somebody said, like, why do talking monkeys need to know why they're emotional? And I'm like, I don't know why, but we want to know. Like, we have so many questions. But that's the complexity of being a human, I guess. And that's why we're here to play the game.
I
The
know.
full range of human emotion.
I'm always like I'm curious as a human, like when I pass on, like what am I gonna laugh at that I was like so hung up on? Like
Ugh.
I have to figure this out, or like humans in general, like what are we gonna laugh at? Because I
Mhm.
know there's beings out there that are laughing at us, and I
Heck
just,
yeah.
you know,
And the power of social media too. One of my favorite things on TikTok is to see like when they'll interview women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that would say like, "What advice would you give to yourself in your 20s?" And
Mhm.
goosebumps, because something that changed my life was from God, that beautiful actress that did. It doesn't matter. I'll figure it out later. But she said that something that changed her life was understanding that no was a complete sentence. And I heard that maybe at year 32 of my life. And it sounds so unbelievably simple, but the light bulb that popped for me, that was like, I don't have to explain myself to people. Like, I don't owe anybody anything. And so it's those things. Again, that's why mentorship and coaching is important. So is therapy, all of those modalities about when you lean into people, because nothing is real. Nothing's real. We make up facts. Facts are not even facts. They're just something that enough people have agreed upon that we say it's true. The molecule was split open less than 2 decades ago or whatever. And we're like, oh, it's not really the smallest thing in the world. Holy shit. So like be accepting of that. Like don't be so rigid in your structure. And that's what, like, you use that word playful all the time, and I forget because we're such adults that we need to be fucking serious when we're raising little people, of course, but playfulness is what the universe loves as well. And why not you? Like that's what's happening with our children and screens. I thought about this with my poor little one yesterday, was that screens are fun and they're great, and there's so much technology and innovation and all of that stuff, but all it is just a satiated need again, right? Like when we're left with ourselves as children, we create stories and playlands and stuff because we don't have anything else to do. We're supposed to do that, but the screen can tell us a story. And we're innately lazy, right? Because why wouldn't we want somebody else to fulfill the need of safety and concern or whatever you're getting from watching that screen? So we really need to make sure that we it's the human experience. It's the human experience, friends. It's not the technological experience. So ironically, as Caitlin and I filmed this on an electronic device, you know what I'm saying? But there's real humanness that's come out of that. This is
Yeah,
connectivity. We're not just playing Candy Crush together. That's different.
right. That would be an interesting episode.
Hmm. Imagine
Yeah,
that.
I agree. And like, I mean, you brought up kids, so I'm going to mention this because we really cut back on screen time and it's a difference in play. Like they play
Yes.
differently. And like, of course we use screens and I find the value in it, but it really is about like paying attention. What are you consuming? Like even me, like the past few years, I have like stopped listening to certain music. I just don't watch certain shows. Like if I turn on a show and I'm like, ick, I'm not like,
Mhm,
I don't watch it.
mhm.
And it might not be even like, I don't even know. Like it's all based off of my perspective anyway. So like it might not be like a low vibrational show, but if it's not resonant with where I'm trying to be, then I'm going to feel that. And that it comes back to that like awareness of self, awareness of what's going on with me. And like with the kids, it's like, okay, how can you teach them to like tune in to their awareness? And it doesn't
Mm,
have to be like, what do you like? It doesn't have to be scripted. It's not scripted. It is like paying attention to how they are tuning in. What is their body language saying? How are they acting after? How are they acting like before? Like if they're demanding a certain show, like just all these
yes.
things that we're able to like say, oh, I feel how it's affecting me. Is it affecting, those around me? And we know it is, it's energy, but it's an interesting conversation because you get the resistance with the kids of like, I just want to watch TV or play on the tablet or whatever. And it's like, no, there's a reason we're doing this.
There is, and parents like Caitlin and I can both like we just said, both of our children, like both of our families, our kids all have phones and screens and stuff like that, and you just have to remember though that's a plight for you, because the way that society is built has made you tired at the end of your day, so you don't have the energy to like you want your kids to play, but you don't have the playfulness to color with them and to paint with them and do the children things, so it's easier to put a phone in their hands. We're not bashing you, I've been there before, but I want you to recognize that important picture is because you're uninspired in your everyday life. You don't have fulfillment and passion. When I come home at the end of a day, like at a party, this is part of the problem with my job, is that I can be there from 10 to 1 a.m. I'm not going to bed until 3 or 4 because I can't go to sleep the minute I come home. I get off of this podcast, I get off of a one-to-one coaching. I know I'm in the right space, professionally speaking, because it doesn't drain me. I had somebody ask me like 2 years ago, and again, another light bulb moment, because she was interested in coaching, and she's like, but how do you do it? How do you people and not be exhausted? And I was like, holy shit, I'd never thought about it, to be honest. And I have come to realize that I feel like one of my human powers is to transmute energy. If I'm in a room with you and you're sharing a very tragic PTSD story, if I'm not bawling with you, it's not because I don't empathize. I feel your pain, boo boo, but it's because I've heard it enough, unfortunately, in my line of work that I know what you're feeling. And I'm going to be able to hold this space for you to get it all out. And by the time you leave the room, you're going to have a sense of relief in some way, shape, or form. I have kept some of it for me and I have sent it back into the universe where it belongs. And I have not taken it on for myself. Does that make sense?
Ah,
Yeah.
100%.
So that's important. So when you feel friends, and if I know that one of the biggest plights of humans is that we cannot be in professions yet that fulfill us and also provide for us financially. I have lived that experience the last decade. You have to believe me when I tell you that. But the mental space that I have had in freedom to be a mother and to be a wife and then be an entrepreneur superseded any time that it might have been tight for us financially. And I need you to hear that, because that might not be your path, and that's okay. But if you ain't getting no fulfillment in your job, you need to volunteer in your community. You need to rescue animals. You need to do something that fills your motherfucking cup, because then you'll have the energy to paint with your kids at the end of the night. And most importantly, of course, all of that example that you're setting for your kids by doing and not just saying. So just important. Like that's important for adults, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
It's
right.
important.
Well, this was amazing. I want to thank you again and also just give you an opportunity to share how we can all connect with you. And if you have anything else you'd like to share for the audience.
Oh my gosh. Well, I am very honored. This was such a blast. I know, by the way, thanks to my therapist, one of my stems through my ADHD is quite literally being vocal. So I don't have to be embarrassed that the fact that my report cards used to say Chatty Cathy, like it's a gift that I know I can talk. So I am very grateful that we had this opportunity. I look forward to continuing that. If people feel like they resonated with me, I try my very best to hit all ends of the spectrum. So if you're somebody who can only afford free services, Caitlin and I are friends on Facebook, so you can find me. I do have a link tree. So whether that's TikTok, Facebook, whatever, I've got a private group for intimacy. You got to be 18 years old or you got to be feminine energy. I know that Meta is old, friends, but we're trying to find an alternative community space. It's free. You can come over there and you learn about your body and stuff like that. I do the one-to-one sessions, as we mentioned, and I created an empowerment class, which is actually happening in like 2 weeks, I think, at the end of this last Wednesday of the month. So, and that usually is when I try to run them. So if any of those things interest you, please reach out to me. If you don't even know where to begin, please reach out to me. We can figure out what option's best, even if that is free. I love free 99 as well. So I understand how that resonates with people until you can get to a place where you can invest in yourself and feel good about that. So whatever feels best to you is how I like to coach, basically.
Awesome. Yeah, so many great resources. I'll make sure to link everything down below so you guys can get to what you want easily. All right. Well, thank you again, Rachel. It was a blast, and I'm just excited for everyone to listen because I know
Oh,
that.
well, I hope that they found something with it that they could resonate. And if you're overwhelmed by how fast I talk, just take 3 notes, and then just like let them seep in and then plant those seeds, friends. But it was totally an honor, and I'm grateful and looking forward to doing the human design together.
Yes, that's going to be so much fun. So,
Yeah.
all right. We will talk to you all next time on the Intuition Playground.